topic of record breaking for the Naiji is related to their notoriety in the public consciousness, as well as the Kensei methodology for trying to understand things. However, it is its own thing because that's a unique driver to it, but it does definitely play into a variety of other things. But you can try and break records separately from trying to become one with an activity like a Kensei does. And you can break records and be very ambitious about that without trying to get any notoriety. Okay. The reason for this is the driving force is the desire to have unprecedented experience. And the more unprecedented it is, that's what gives it its deliciousness. So that's probably the first thing starting out, but there's several things that kind of compound that to lead Naiji to both break records and be interested in the concept of breaking records. So that's one right there, is Naiji tend to break their own records because whenever Naiji do things, their simulator basically shows them, and they themselves are interested in personal best. So that's kind of what they're always doing. I know everyone actually is interested in personal best, but for Naiji, there's often a disinterest in spending time doing any activities where one is not working towards a personal best in some way. In fact, there can be a great exclusion of other activities to that purpose. And you see this sort of brought out in an artistic way or a sort of spiritual way with the Kensei way of doing a certain thing. But Naiji as an overall tend to find that the most savory thing, to the exclusion of other tastes. Most of normal life can seem rather blah, even though it's tasty. It offers, basic treats that people are interested in. For the Naiji, often it doesn't give you that oomph. In fact, it's preferable often to be contemplating a new peak and then getting to that new peak, even though a substantial amount of time is spent maybe not savoring things in the day-to-day moment. In fact, some Naiji often lament and try to really be present in the moment. And it's because their natural way is to keep thinking about the future and these high moments you could achieve. And so that leads itself towards breaking records only because that's the natural cycling, which is that preference for peak experiences and sort of like a willingness to forego eating moderately pricey food and just eating more normally, but then allowing yourself the chance to go to fine restaurants or bring certain really fine cooking to your home, gourmet stuff, so that you know what it tastes like. A lot of Naiji will do this naturally, where they will, in their home, perhaps leave a rather ascetic lifestyle, but then when it comes to their bird collection or something else, they want it to be connoisseur. They want it to be to where they can truly feel they're actually leading an elevated life. Elevated as far as, it can just have sort of like elevated as far as like elevated palate, but it goes deeper than that, in that just that I know what life had to offer. So there can be this desire that I'd rather have fewer things but experience them at a higher level. Then I'll feel like if I checked out, this is kind of a Naiji thing, when I check out, everyone kind of wants to have a collection of life they can be proud of and feel good when they leave. For Naiji, they really want those highs to be very, very high, and they'll actually go long treks in order to have super high peaks. It's just appealing to the Naiji psyche. A couple things that go along with that is long cycles. Nai is the longest percolating of the powers, the longest process as far as for full cycle. So Nai in general tends to go very long term, but Nai with Ji has a tendency to do that with people, so that the plans Nai Ji take often by their nature are very far out. So a child Nai Ji, it's not uncommon to start thinking about, what kind of score do I want to have when I'm 80, when I'm going to, close to the grave, like those kinds of things. So that lends itself to record breaking, because you're thinking about, what am I going to do with, say, 10, 20, 30 years? Anytime any human is able to look at their life in terms of its years and start realistically, Nai Ji tend to be very good at this, allotting what of their life they want to do to different things. Often they don't know exactly where they're going, but they are plotting out a life course that tends to actually be able to bring a lot to bear on a given occasion, because the way the Nai Ji cycle works is, with a Nai, a lot of time is spent thinking and planning, and then there are occasional bursts of like real world demonstration. So if you think about that, if you're going to put on feats of wow, whatever that feat of wow would be, how would you do that? You'd probably think really long term about what you need to do to be wow, and what the other wowy humans that this would be relevant to, how they do it. And you plan to kind of do better than that. And then you Nai out what is required, and you keep the visionary drive, long-range planning, you keep that in your mind's eye, and you kind of ignore the rest of life so that you can actually hit that note on that concert day or on that performance day. So this can actually get Nai Ji in a lot of trouble, because they tend to really try to marshal all the forces of their life onto one thing. If it goes well, and this is not a bad thing, it's really a question of whether or not it goes well or not. Whether or not when they marshal all the forces of their life onto one activity or one path, if that's something that's actually going to take them to where they want to be as far as enlightenment, or if it's going to end up being a derailment. But either way, records tend to be broken when that process happens. Whenever a human thinks with their Nai, what could I do with all my powers, and Ji, all the powers of the friends I get a hold of, on one thing? That by nature tends to break a lot of records. So, what else? Nai Ji tend to actually be extremely hard on themselves, because in their Nai simulator, they have like an Uber them, and the Uber them would always get it right. So no matter how well the Nai Ji does in the real world, or even in their simulator, the Uber them always does it way better. So Nai Ji who break records, it's not uncommon for them to keep breaking records. They'll break one record, and then the Uber them in their head makes that look like not that big of a deal. And so then the Nai Ji feels compelled to keep going. I mean, it sounds like you do end up being dissatisfied a great amount. Being dissatisfied helps. So the dissatisfaction that is shared with the other Nai Alpha, Nai Z, is coupled with the Ji Nai directive romantic urge to stand out in the tribe. So those two things together, the desire to want to be a noteworthy special human in the tribe, and then Nai Alpha dissatisfaction with any performance, no matter how great it was, it could be better. What else? Eccentric. Nai Ji are very eccentric, but they learn early on. Rage is a tool they use as well as shape-shifting and a few other things. But record breaking is something that Nai Ji learn early on, is a special clause you get. Both the direct romantics have a thing about the way the powers that be operate. Ji Nai tend to go sometimes to throwing sort of like volatile displays. Nai Ji also will do that as well, but they tend to prefer going with the Nai if they can, which is they want special treatment. Both the Ji Nai and the Nai Ji don't really want the powers that be to treat them as some sort of cog. So the two ways that work really well is a demonstration of temper. Often associate that with Ji, for example, with the direct romantics, but also Nai. If you can perform something that goes off of the current record, you get special treatment. And Naiji learned that early on. Even Naiji who don't think themselves as record breakers, they all are. They'll do things that were different for that office, different for that family, different for that team, so that it gives them the right to ask for the unique kinds of things, the environment that Naiji need. Naiji tend to be, you know, particular about the way their environment is, and being so dominant actually in nature, they don't like to ask for special attention. But when you break a record in any way, it breaks the mold in people's mind that you're a normal person. Now you can do the display of G temper, but for Naiji it's more energy efficient and smoother, slicker, more nuanced to actually have your record speak for you. Now you can see how this relates to notoriety, but actually the reason breaking a record, it doesn't have to make you famous. It could even just be one person knows that about you. Just that maybe the coach who's coaching you, you break the record for doing some sort of physical thing of any player that coach has ever had before. Even if no one else sees you do it but that coach. But then the coach treats you like this unknown quantity. And Naiji like being treated as an unknown quantity. They demand that, really. And so, almost instinctually, they will do things in order to set themselves apart. And so, when one incessantly sets oneself apart and has very high standards for oneself, record breaking tend to happen sometimes as part of that process. Does that make sense? Okay. A fascination with record breaking in general. Again, it isn't that Naiji are just fascinated with breaking records, but it's a byproduct, which is, if you're trying to figure out what it's all about and you're a Naiji, the easiest way to constellate is by people. So you're going to take, if you're a scientist Naiji, what is it that all the best have been able to do? Now a lot of the best obviously broke records, but the issue is, what are humans capable of? Because a Naiji wants to know what is existence, what is our role in it. In order to know that, you have to know what are humans capable of doing. So there's a real fascination with that, like in the history of the world, in all the countries in modern times, in the future possibly, what are humans capable of? And like really knowing all that would mean, taking in all of human sort of mechanics with a G, like motivations, and then Xi, like hardcore. What have humans been able to do? Under the most horrific conditions, under the most amazing conditions, what can they do? Once you study that enough, then the V sometimes makes you want to be a player in that. So, you know what I mean? It's kind of like if you are studying anything long enough where you admire the people in that data pool, you want to be a member of that data pool. So Naiji is trying to figure out the way life works. They're like, well, who knew? And so constellates all the people who seem to really know what life was all about, be it spirituality or science. And as you're studying on that, that kind of tells a Naiji the kind of hero they want to be. And usually it has to do with someone who has broken ground in a way that the Naiji can relate to and thinks that maybe they could do something like that. That's very, very inspiring to the Naiji. So it's almost an instinct to find people who are, another one too, independence of mind. And these are very much related, is trying to find people who seem to know what they were doing and were able to shrug off the impingements of the world telling them they weren't right. Naiji feel very beaten on by the world telling them their ways are wrong or not valuable when they know they are, but they need validation. Record breaking can be a profound validation that I do in fact know what the fuck I'm talking about. And Naiji, when they study people in history in modern times of people they'd like to be with, one of the main things that they seem to resonate with, people who are able to stand their ground under insurmountable odds and not back down because they were right. That's very appealing to a Naiji, and in order to do that, or in the process of doing that, often records are broken. But really it is the ability, that's the core. So record breaking, Naiji really shouldn't get overly fascinated with just doing that to do it, because that's not the point. But the point is to be able to figure out what one needs to do in order to walk one's own way. That's what it is. And for the Naiji, amazing demonstrations of mastery at key moments is a very good way to do that. And so you don't need to worry about breaking records, although obviously that can be fun and you can do that. But the main thing is, it is key to the Naiji psychology to be able to do periodic displays of mastery that are extremely high level and take a lot of time to prepare and maybe even recover from. But that actually is very energy efficient and crucial to the way we want to be seen, which is given a lot of room to do what we need to do as far as the percolation phase. Like people go, oh, they're working on their next project, they're working on their next magic trick, they're working on their next novel. Naiji like that. They like actually people to be like, okay, give them that thing, but also respect that they have seen in something they can remember, something that amazed them. And it gives the Naiji the ability to sort of take their time with things. It buys them, in the environment, it buys them coin. Because the last thing here is Naiji naturally are more comfortable with like a portfolio system, which is they want to be known for what they personally can do. So it's cool to actually have something that's noteworthy enough, or even if it's just one-to-one person, it will impress them enough that you're different. For example, Naiji break records all the time just being students when they want to impress a teacher. They'll often do things to show that teacher that they really care about their personal progress more than other students that they have met before. And if they're able to convey to that teacher that they're a different kind of student, they will get a special connection to that teacher, which will give them a rare opportunity as a student they wouldn't get otherwise. So Naiji want to be able to display that I'm something different, and record breaking is a good way to do that, and often happens unintentionally in the course of trying to make that thing happen.